What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over Demonology and Mythic Plus and why I think it's one of the better specs, if not one of the best specs to play right now. Kind of going through like my talents and legendaries and how to play it. And then I will show a clip of kind of how I demonstrate what I'm talking about in this video. So, to start off, it is ideal that you have your two-piece tier set. I know it's kind of early on, so not everyone has two-piece. I believe this build is probably still okay without two-piece, but you're better off probably playing a Wilfred setup with Grimoire Felguard until you get this two set. The legendary we're using is Grim Inquisitors, which stacks every single time you spend a shard. So if you have 3 shards, it stacks 4% each shard, so you get 12%, right? And we're kind of abusing this mechanic because there is no buff duration on this, so what you can do is stack it up to maximum, which is 30 stacks, and it gives you 120% increased damage. And you can stack that up for big AoE pulls, and you can also stack that up before bosses and just do pretty ridiculous amounts of damage. Talent setup we're using is full dog build, which is Dreadlash, Demonic Calling, and From the Shadows. And the reason we're using Soul Conduit here instead of Grimoire Felguard is to get those shard procs. And sometimes we get a proc, which we got one there, right? But sometimes we'll get back-to-back 3 procs. And that builds our Grim Inquisitors even faster than we would, you know, if we had a Wilfred's on or didn't have Soul Conduit. So we're building our legendary incredibly quickly with Soul Conduit. And of course we're using Demonic Consumption. So as you can see, I've been doing some keys this week. I've done every key timed between 15 and 18. Everything except the streets, but I mean, that dungeon is a whole different beast, so yeah. Kind of getting into the rotation. At the start of the dungeon, you're not going to be doing a lot of damage. You kind of, you know, when people are popping their cooldowns and stuff on big pulls, you also just want to have like your normal rotation, you know. Build up some shards, get your dogs, and then, you know, Tyrant, right? But then once you start getting momentum is really where the build shines. So once your Tyrant's out, what you're doing is you're building your stacks on your legendary for the next pack. So you always have to be forward thinking when you're playing the spec, and it even helps because you can get really good value out of your imps and implosion, right? So if we get out of combat here, say we get 24 stacks and the pack dies, and we have our army of imps here. We go into the next pack, we dreadstalkers, and we can implode for like crazy burst damage because we'll have an army of imps from our previous pull, and we'll have our legendary built pretty high. So we can go in, do big burst damage right away, and then we can just continue with our normal rotation, right? We're just using demon bolts, getting some shards back, building a big group of imps, dreadstalkers, implosion. And we just kind of keep that cycle going throughout the entire dungeon, right? Building your shards, 6, 9, 12 imps, get a nice amount of stacks on your Grim Inquisitors, Dreadstalkers, implode. And that's kind of like the cycle we're doing throughout the entire dungeon when there are like big AoE packs, right? When we're moving on to single target, same thing, we want to have our legendary stacked up. So if we want to get it as close to 30 stacks as possible, which is 120% damage. Say we're full stacks here, you know, we'll build up to 5 shards. And then we'll just use our shards, you know, dog, tyrant, soul rod, etc. And then we just continue blasting from here. So the style is pretty simple. You're really just building your stacks, building your imps for the next pack, right? And so throughout your pull, you're thinking about what is coming next and how big you're going to pull what's coming next. If you have a single mob, you know, maybe you'll use your Dreadstalkers early. That way on the next pack, then you can have higher stacks on it. And that's kind of it. It's pretty simple play style. I'm going to show you a clip on kind of how I use it in a Plague Fall that I did. So I'll go back here. You can see I'm just kind of building my stacks on this ooze before I get the haste buff on it. But I'm at 24 stacks on my legendary. You know, pop my trinket. I played Necro in this dungeon because we needed one. Generally, you'd play Night Fae just because Dreamweaver is way better in AoE, and even in single target, it's just the best spec right now, or the best Covenant right now. However, I swapped to Necro because my group needed one. Just pop my dogs, building shards here. Pop the Tyrant and just delete the boss, right? You can see I'm doing 23, 24k, and it just keeps getting higher and higher as time goes on. And this is without a, this is without 4Ps. So I think our damage is going to be even crazier once people start getting 4 pieces and getting even higher gear. Our single target is just going to be pretty absurd. You can see I'm doing 28k right now. This is with, the haste buff you get and Plague Fall specifically. So your damage won't be, 30k damage. However, it will be pretty high, around 15k, and it can sustain that for quite a long time. And so as you can see, you're just trying to build shards and build stacks on your Grim Inquisitors before you cast your dogs. And that's pretty much how you would play it on a single target. And this strategy is incredibly strong, specifically for tyrannical weeks, because what do a lot of classes lack right now in Mythic Plus is they lack good single target or they lack good AoE. Very few classes have both besides like rogues. Rogues have okay AoE, really good single target. And that's kind of where Demo fits in, is we bring really, really strong single target, but we also have pretty good AoE. And now with this legendary, we have the potential to have burst AoE because we can build our stacks, send in our dogs with whatever imps we have, implode. And this is before we are able to craft second legendaries, so once we are able to use our Covenant ability legendary, we're going to get more haste, more crit, and so we're going to be able to summon even more dogs, more imps, faster. And so we're going to be able to stack this up even more and do even more damage as time goes on. So I know this is a pretty brief guide, but just kind of want to bring attention to Demonology as a spec overall. This specific talent build and this legendaries. I still see a lot of people using wilfreds. I'm not sure if that's because they don't have their 2-piece yet or if they just don't know how strong this build actually is. But if you haven't yet, and if you have your 2-piece, definitely try this build out. It's incredibly strong, both on Fortified and Tyrannical weeks. You don't have to wait for cooldowns besides your Tyrant, which is really nice to have. You're just able to do crazy burst every single pull, and it's pretty high overall. On average, I would say I'm doing between 12,000 and 15,000 overall in a key, depending on the level of the key, obviously, and how much we're pulling, but it's pretty good damage. Probably one of the highest damage classes right now, this early on in the patch. So give it a shot. Let me know how it goes for you. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. See you in the next one.